Call this meeting to order at 6:37 PM. We begin with public input, if anybody has any comments. Mr. Simons, Nolan, can you just hand him that microphone?
No worries.
That's just for NORCAM, but.
Yeah. More of a request than a comment when you get, perhaps it's more appropriate when we get to the budget hearing. As we're halfway through the school year, I'd be curious to hear your input about the items that the override would have taken care of for this school year. What's been the impact of not having those services available as you now get at this point of the year? If you haven't addressed this yet, I'd be curious to go over that. But if you want to do it during the budget hearing, that'd be great.
Well, it's just interesting that you're here with the public comment, whereas it was 4 weeks ago, or so 2 meetings ago, we had 2 of the elementary teachers here talking about the impacts that they were seeing in their classrooms, first grade and kindergarten, and they were talking about the lack of paras and the additional help in kindergarten classes, and how they were noticing a difference there. And it was, they basically gave a very compelling speech about how they had been teaching in the district for a long time, had really noticed the impact, and I believe they had spoken about publishing in the transcript. I'm not sure if it made it that far.
Yeah.
But that's the one that comes top of mind, because they brought it literally right to our desks here.
Yes. Yeah, and just for the record, I mean, tonight's not the public hearing. Tonight's just the initial presentation. Okay. But I have no problem, like, if people are taking the time to come here and people have comments, what we'll probably do is have Mr. Connolly do the presentation. We'll probably ask questions and comments, and then if other people have comments at the time, I have no problem with hearing them during the meeting. So if people took the time to come here, I'm happy to hear their interest and their questions. So, okay. Any other public comment? Seeing none, we move to the student report. We have Nolan Pierce here today for class of 2027.
Thank you. Just starting off, for notable academic matters, students will have Friday off for professional development. On March 7th, we had the World of STEM Science Fair, where Akash Stewart studied locational air quality, and Vanessa Steinmeier, Quinn Kelly, and Helena Brain studied the impact of road salt on conductivity in the Ipswich River. Then for North Reading Public Schools, STEM night is this Thursday at 5 p.m. Sophomores and freshmen are currently wrapping up their course selection. I know for me, sophomore, I have that deadline by Wednesday. NHS, National Honor Society, applications are due on Monday, March 17th. Now for fine arts matters, the one act competition is on Saturday here in North Reading for the semifinal round. Notorious competes in Worcester on March 16th. Then moving on for athletic matters, all winter sports have ended, and kind of just as like a recap for the state tournaments that went on, boys hockey ended Elite 8, girls hockey ended in the round of 16, boys basketball round of 16, and girls basketball in the Elite 8. Spring sports registration is open, season starts March 17th, and tomorrow night we're going to have sports awards. Then kind of just for some other matters, student council annual conference was last week. One of our students won a state delegate position, and as a whole, North Reading Student Council took home the award for Gold Council of Excellence. And next week on the 19th, we're going to have parent-teacher conferences. And then now to wrap up my student work report. So in my Spanish class, I don't know if you can see, we were given the choice to generate like a topic. So I picked, for example, entertainment, and then you pick a Spanish podcast, and you kind of just summarize it in your own words, presenting all in Spanish. So it's kind of just a good way to just like reflect on all your Spanish speaking, and you can kind of elaborate on the topic and then go more into the podcast. And I just picked a review on a movie that I had watched recently, and it was really like just interesting experience for me. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Comments, questions?
What was the movie? Was it good?
I watched the new Captain America movie. It was actually really good. Yeah.
You watched it in Spanish?
What'd you say? Sorry.
You watched it in Spanish?
No, I didn't watch in Spanish, sadly, but yeah.
Fair enough.
Comments, but-
Well, it's great to hear that, because the student council was here, I don't know, recently, talking about their, the conference they were going to, and they were hoping to be awarded, and so excited
Yeah.
to hear
Little
that they were.
clairvoyance right there. I like that. So the podcast you listened to that was in Spanish, and then you.
Yeah, it was all in Spanish, so I kind of just had to come up with like a summary and then present it to the class.
Do you find it harder to write in Spanish or listen in Spanish?
I'd say listen, because when you're writing, it's all, you can kind of slow down, just break it into pieces, but when you're listening, it's much more faster paced, and especially in another language, it's much more difficult.
So with Spanish, I'm just curious, when did you start taking Spanish?
I started taking Spanish in 6th grade.
In 6th grade, so it was offered as in 6th grade here?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, again, that's one of the budgetary issues we're talking about is, foreign language at the middle school in particular. And so I'm curious, like, what was your experience with, did you like having it as a 6th grader? Do you feel more comfortable when you got to high school having a little bit of an introduction in 6th and 7th grade, or not?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like, having that experience going into high school, because when you start high school, you can start with Spanish too. So all that prior experience in the middle school was really helpful. All my teachers just like really prepared me for the like coursework that we have in the high school for Spanish. So I think that it's essentially like crucial for learning the language.
Thank you. And then, you've come here before, right?
Yeah, this is my
year,
second
right?
time.
Yeah, and then
Absolutely.
the only other question, not really for you, more for Dr. Daly, I think, but for the student works, can we get that shared before? Is that a possibility? To have, like, ask the students to share it so we could just see it before and,
You can do it however you'd like.
yes.
Right now, they usually do that.
Could,
We
yeah,
meet- We usually meet the day of.
okay. Well, that would be the request, if you could just send it out, just so we can look at it, and, again, it's great to see, but, like, I'd love to be able to actually, like, see a little bit more of it, so.
He's the only one that will try to print them out beforehand. Anyway, so.
I would, but, like, yes,
Or at the very least, project it.
right. They'll make fun of me for having paper, but, yes,
I
okay.
can, I can try to get that.
Yeah, if they could just share it out or whatever. if
I have
possible.
one other question, not to drag this out anymore, but you were mentioning the STEM night or the STEM, and one of the presentations you mentioned was the effect of salt in the Ipswich River.
Yeah, I think so. There was a STEM science fair. It was
Okay. And was that a student presentation, or was that?
yeah, it was a student presentation. We had 3 students work together on that, and they went to a fair along with other schools, and then they presented it to them.
Okay.
Yeah.
I want to see that. I wonder where I can see that. Like hanging up somewhere in the school. Anyways, I'm sorry, just curious. That
No
sounds very
worries.
Yeah,
interesting.
I'm not sure whether that's going to be recreated at our fair. I can
Yeah.
find that out. and
Yeah,
let you
no,
know.
I think it sounds fascinating.
Mm.
Okay, sorry.
Thank you, Nolan, and as always, you're welcome to stay, you're also welcome to go, so.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, moving on, I guess we're gonna, do we have anybody here for guests tonight, or is it just our own stuff?
It's just a,
So do you wanna do the policies really quickly and just move on? Let's just do continued business, so we have 2 second readings, so the policy subcommittee wants to make a motion, we'll get a second, we'll see if there's any comments after that, and then, we'll do the second reading approval.
All right, perfect. So the first is a second reading of policy ABBA, which, if you recall, that's a non-discrimination and harassment policy. This essentially reverts the policy back to its previous revision in 2020
After a state law change.
after.
Yeah,
that's
federal
correct.
change.
So this is compliant with
Correct.
the new law,
Right.
federal law.
federal law,
Federal
thank
law,
you.
yeah.
So go ahead, I'd like to make a motion to approve for a second reading, policy ABBA.
Second?
We have a motion, we have a second. Any comment, discussion?
Kind of wish we'd just call it ABBA.
Okay,
You don't have no idea how many jokes I had in my head, Jeff.
there we go. Okay,
I'm good.
since Jen is not here, we're gonna do a roll call vote. Tim,
Aye.
Noel,
Aye.
Jeff,
Aye.
Jen,
Aye.
still with us. I'm aye as well. Passes 5-0. Second one?
Okay, second policy is policy JRD, second reading for Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, otherwise known as FERPA. no, obviously, there were no red lines from the first reading, so there's no change. This is the exact same as before. The really main difference here is striking out the directory information and replacing it with the school committee and superintendent to make sure that individual student records are confidential. So I'd like to make a motion to approve for second reading, policy JRD.
Second?
We have a motion, we have a second. Any comment or discussion? Okay, we'll do a roll call vote. Tim?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
Noel?
Aye.
Jen?
Aye.
I'm an aye as well, passes 5-0. Thank you, Policy Subcommittee. And now on to the new business. We have the preliminary budget hearing. I will turn it over, or I'll just wait for a second.
Do we want to do the field naming first and then,
We can do, yeah, if Mr. Conley just stepped out for a minute, that's
Stepped
fine.
out for a
We can go out of the school field naming, so. At the last meeting, we had a public hearing to look at potential names of fields.
let's just keep going.
What was that?
I said, let's just keep going.
Right, and so, the only question is, do we want to make, well, we have to see if we want to actually put this before town meeting. And there were two different fields we were talking about, potentially, or a broader idea of the whole complex. And so, there's the two different, well, let's start with multipurpose field / middle school, high school complex. From the public hearing, I heard some consent that we wanted to do something in the name of Chuck Carucci, Charles Carucci, and I don't know what we think. Did we get any more clarification from the town on if there's any restrictions on the complex? Do we know, Dr. Daly?
Nothing official, but several people I spoke to just felt it makes it a lot more complicated to do that.
Makes it a lot more complicated to name it.
To number one, to bring it into an area where it wasn't discussed in the public hearing, to maybe, get people agitated. Mr. Johnson, I spoke with, I shared it with Michael Gilberto. I didn't hear anything back officially, but, it does make it a little more complicated. There may be, definitely the town, the football field and the turf field, sorry, and that area is town property. So the question of whether we have the right to name that, and then we'd have to say that's not a part of the complex, it just gets, it's more cumbersome. So, but it, and at town meeting, I think we don't want this to be debated, right? We just want it to be put through, so, but.
So, what's the feeling of the committee, I guess? Do we want to make a motion to name the multipurpose field? Do we want to make a motion to name the entire complex, or?
No, I would suggest to go with the path of least resistance. I would say that because we don't want to leave this open for who knows how long. We've already had a hearing on it. We have some level of consensus. We do have consensus on it. And we all agree on who should be named. It's a matter, who should be a part of it. It's just a matter of which fields, and bird in hand.
Yeah.
Go forward.
Okay, you want to make a motion then?
There's language there.
There's language, yeah.
Oh.
You see the thing?
So help.
Yeah, but I don't actually have my glasses.
I
Someone
will
else
read it.
Yeah.
No one's got it.
Okay, so do I have to do one for each field?
Yeah, let's just do the multipurpose field first.
Okay. Let's see, I move to name the school, oh wait, do we have the, sorry. But are we actually voting, in honor of, so I just
Yeah.
fill in the two names, right,
One
okay,
name for now, yeah.
okay. No, but we're not voting, they're voting at town meeting.
We're
We're voting, and then we're voting to bring it
Yeah.
forward to town meeting.
It says
That's what
recommend
this is
to be placed on the
recommending.
warrant.
You're naming it tonight, and then we are also going to make part of the motion is to include it in the warrant, and then it has to be voted in town meeting also, but it has to be voted by school committee and then voted by town meeting.
Okay, so am I moving first so we're doing one for each?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh.
Or, yeah, at least one is on the table, right?
Okay, okay. I moved to name the school-related facility, sorry, I thought I was signing up for something,
Multi-purpose.
multipurpose field.
Yeah.
In honor of Mr. Charles Carucci, and recommend that this be placed on the warrant for inclusion at the June town meeting.
Second.
Should we clarify that we'll name it the Charles Carucci Field. Do you want to say that?
Sure, the Charles Carucci Field
Good.
in honor
So
of
move to name the multipurpose field, the
Charles
Carucci Field in honor of Charles Carucci.
Charles Carucci, and recommend that this be placed on the warrant for inclusion at the June town meeting.
Okay.
Second.
So we have a motion, kind of amended. We have a second. Any discussion? So we'll do a roll call vote. Noel,
Aye.
Jeff,
Aye.
Tim,
Aye.
Jen,
Aye.
I'm an aye as well. Passes 5-0. And then softball field. So I think the only discussion I have on this at all is, I did have Mr. Venezia reached out to me, and he withdrew his name officially from consideration for the field, and,
Okay.
I don't know.
I guess
Again,
that makes it
I
easier.
just said I would officially say it, and
That's fine.
I guess the only question is just, I think there was a lot of support for Mrs. Vant
Mm-hmm.
for that field. I mean, I think the only question at all is like, do we need to name it now or not name it now? But I think there was some consensus to move forward,
Yeah, I think so.
so,
I definitely felt
Yeah.
that there was a lot of support.
right,
for-
I don't think she would be any less deserving if we were to put this off for
Right.
years.
right. I mean, yeah, so then, if someone wants to make a motion,
I will do it a little more smoothly this time.
okay?
I move to name the school-related facility, the softball field, I guess we're gonna call it the Jennifer Casoli Vant softball field, in honor of, Mrs. Jennifer Casoli Vant, and recommend that this be placed on the warrant for inclusion at the June town meeting.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion, we have a second. Any more discussion? Okay, we'll do a roll call vote. Noel,
Aye?
Jeff,
Aye.
Tim,
Aye.
Jen,
Aye.
I'm an aye as well. Passes 5-0. Thank you, everyone. And then, now we're going back to the budget
Okay, great, sorry about that.
Woohoo.
presentation. Mr.
Excellent.
Connolly.
I do have copies. Folks in the audience want them.
For a second there, I thought he said he had coffee.
Coffee. I printed a copy myself.
Oh,
No, that's good to know.
Are you able to just do?
Don't make me comment on that.
You wanna use the PowerPoint? It's okay.
Doesn't matter, actually. Whatever is easier for you.
Is there anything dynamic in it, or is it just the pictures?
Just pictures.
Because it's easier just to scroll.
Flames.
What?
And flames.
So as Dr. Daly pulls that up, we're going to go through the preliminary FY '26 presentation. We did post the school budget book, which has been in board members' hands for a couple weeks since February break, on the website this morning. This presentation was posted on the website as well. So there's information out there now for FY '26 for the public. But we're gonna follow a similar template than we've followed in the past. These are the agenda items I'll cover. We're gonna just start kind of on the macro level, talk about the revenue sources in a school budget, talk about the various budget challenges, the structural kind of deficit challenges that we deal with in municipal and school finance. We'll get into the budget drivers, which have been similar for many years now, but we'll go over those. We're gonna talk about you'll get a sense in the presentation what this administration's priorities are from a budget perspective. We'll break down some of the numbers. We'll get into some staffing positions and really what it means to be what a level services budget is. And we'll talk about what is being recommended and presented this evening. Because it is, if you've been part of this process for a number of years now in North Reading, if this is what you're hearing tonight, based on just some of the trends and what's going on in the financial challenges at the town level, down to the school level, and the failed override and so forth, that in the history is you're gonna hear a level services budget and not sort of a modified level services budget. And we'll talk about the difference and some of the staffing positions that we would like to be recommending, that maybe are not recommending, but we want to kind of talk about the impact, kind of getting into Mr. Simons' question earlier this evening in public comment. We'll get into offsets, and then we'll kind of conclude with what the budget represents. So revenue sources in a school municipal budget, local taxes make up the largest piece of the pie. That's always going to be the case at 74%. Then we have our state aid, so our Chapter 70 aid, unrestricted local government aid that flows into the town. That is at 12.3%. Then we have our various local receipts that, examples of those: permits, fees, licensing fees, excise tax, meals tax, fines and forfeits, various things that go in to make up our local receipts. That's 7.3%. Then the school department, that flows kind of outside of what our appropriation is with the town, but we also have our user fees and our tuitions that we assess for our various optional programs: athletics, extracurricular, full day K, preschool tuition, full day K tuition, busing fee. Those fees represent our additional revenue that helps offset the budget. And then we have state and federal grants that also make up a piece of our revenue, but are outside of what our general fund or request is, but they're also part of our revenue sources as well. So we'll get into some of those fees and grants at the end, the conclusion of the presentation. Challenges, so this has been the case for many, many years, and North Reading is not alone. When you look at Proposition 2.5 and the limitations of raising revenue each year, there's only so much you can do under that formula. And our fixed costs, generally, as you can see in the chart at the top, rise much greater than the revenue that's flowing into the community. We talked a lot about this last year when we talked about the potential for a Proposition 2.5 override for the first time in many, many years, and what this structural deficit meant and the challenges behind it. It doesn't get easier, it doesn't get better, it doesn't fix itself, so it still exists. And we have fixed costs rising at a greater amount than what we're able to bring in revenue through property taxes, from various new growth and so forth. There's just limitations of what that revenue does. And our fixed costs, like health insurance is one, other just maintenance utilities costs that just rise at a much greater rate, and they create this structural deficit when you start to build municipal and school budgets. We also have diminishing school revenue, so there's really limited revenue that's out there that we can help offset our budget. We had this ESSER funding that you talked about. That was a big topic of conversation a year ago. That funding is no longer there. Emergency relief COVID-19 funding, when I say ESSER. So we do charge fees, we do have grants. Most of our grant offsets into the budget are sort of entitlement grants that flow through a formula based on our low income status and so forth, and our population, our demographics of the community, and they help offset certain expenses, but there's a limit to what those can be. And we just have high fixed cost increases. Busing, as you'll see, is going up considerably from regular and special ed. Inflationary supply increases, shipping increases, materials are higher, paper costs are higher, everything is higher than it was. Utility rates are going up, gas, electricity, water. So we have these high fixed cost increases that we have no control over, that we have to adjust the budget by. And then we have our special education costs, which is certainly an important piece of the budget, an important piece of our educational process, but there's just a level of uncertainty there that presents a challenge. Our budget drivers, these drivers have been the same for a number of years as I look at the budget. But I think it's just typical in school budgets that you're gonna have contractual salary obligations, those funds that we need to meet our contractual obligations with our employees, unions and non-union staff, that go up, that see modest salary increases and adjustments from year to year. But because of our budget is 83% staffing, and that's gonna be the case across the state, in any school budget, really across the country, we need to adjust and meet those obligations. And that's always gonna be a huge driver of the budget, because so much of the pie represents employees and salaries. That's where how we drive our budget and how we move things forward in the district. So that's the largest piece of the pie. Our operational fixed costs, as I mentioned earlier, to maintain this campus, to maintain the building, to continue the same amount of services like what we're doing for the busing, for special ed and regular ed, how we maintain our campuses for HVAC control, maintain utilities, all those expenses, operational costs, continue to rise. And we're seeing these rises at a higher rate, with busing going up double-digit increases, Utilities having high increases. Maintenance bids are out to bid this year for upkeep of our roofs, upkeep of our HVAC equipment, upkeep of our plumbing and so forth. Those rates are rising, and we have to adjust the budget for it. What's part of this conversation, even though it might not be an impact on the budget, is just the fact that we aren't recommending any staffing restorations from the positions that were reduced a year ago to balance the budget once the field override occurred. And we want to talk about that tonight because we want to address the impact of that and why it's not being recommended, because of the challenges that still exist. And our strategic plan, which is known as NRPS 2030, which has always been initiatives we're trying to move forward. We want to continue to talk about what those are and what the administration's high priorities are to move the district forward and meet those strategic plan objectives. Even though you'll see in a moment we're not recommending, or they're not part of the budget request at this time. And then special education costs. So again, we continue to see a rising need to meet our special education population, our ELL population in some cases, that our high needs population of students. It's very important that we do that. And we're seeing those costs rise as well, to both in-district and out-district, to meet the needs of our students. We continue to look at our programs in-house, reallocate resources where appropriate to meet those students' needs. And then we're also seeing a rise in our out-of-district population for transportation and tuitions, and those rates are going up double digits as well in some cases. So it's certainly a budget driver. So what is a level services budget? That is what's being recommended this evening, and I'll get to the numbers. But when we say level services, what do we mean by that? We mean that the staffing levels and educational service that exist this year, currently, this school year, will essentially carry forward into next year. A level staffing budget is essentially no new staff recommendations. We've made adjustments to meet contractual obligations. So a level services budget this year means that it's level staffing as well. In some cases, if there was an enrollment need, and we'll talk about enrollment in a moment, we might see an enrollment adjustment, and we would consider that level services. It just so happens the enrollment, for the most part, is not seeing huge changes amongst grade level and amongst our levels, so we're not seeing a need there. So this budget, level services budget, is level staffing as well. As I mentioned earlier, it includes no restorations of staff that were reduced last year, or no new NRPS initiatives, 2020-30, our strategic plan initiatives. It does include the adjustments that we have to make for our fixed costs for student transportation, utilities, maintenance. I talked about that. It does include funding to support our specialized programs to meet our high needs population, and that's an important aspect of what we do. And it does include adjustments for out-of-district costs for tuitions and transportations for students being educated outside the district. So currently, we had budgeted this current school year's budget for 40 students being educated outside the district. We are seeing a need to budget that number at 46 next year. So if we get into the numbers, this is what our preliminary FY26 budget represents. When you compare that to FY25, current fiscal year, the major expense categories between salaries, instructional costs, operations, transportation, and tuitions. And I think you can see some of the changes within these numbers and how we're getting to a budget level services, again, budget increase of 5.6%, or a budget that's $41,377,801, a little bit more than a $2.2 million increase. You can see some of these budget drivers at play. Certainly the salaries number reflects a big part of that increase. You can see the need for the significant increase in the rates of transportation and additional students needing transportation. That number reflects both special ed and regular ed transportation. So those are two big drivers. We look at our fixed costs and our salary obligations that are all leading to the need for the $2.2 million increase. Just look at some pie charts so you can see where some of the priorities are by the administration, where we're spending our money. And certainly instructional services, that's services directly to the classroom, technology, classroom materials, classroom teachers, support in our classroom, represents the highest piece of the pie. And that's important that it does that at 75.7%. We continue to see below average administrative costs, below 3% at 2.9%. We see our operations and maintenance, another larger piece of the pie to maintain our facilities, at 8.8%. These percentage breakdowns have been pretty static over the last number of years, although we are seeing slight changes in tuitions piece of the pie increasing, operation and maintenance piece of that pie increasing. I think that's related to those high fixed cost rate increases that we've been seeing. But certainly instructional services representing more than 75%. When you look at this pie chart, as I mentioned earlier, our salaries and compensation for staff is actually at 82% this year. We then have some of our remaining costs, like contractual services, utilities, are all at 4.1%. When you add those together, tuition's at 7.4%. So I like to kind of, to me, this pie chart represents that we have a lot of fixed costs in the school budget. So you're looking at a $41.3 million plus request this evening to the community to fund the school budget. And when you look at what we're obligated to spend, what our contractual obligations are with existing staff to meet the demands of the services we're providing currently, as well as some of these fixed costs like transportation, contractual services for maintenance areas, utilities, our out-of-district tuition costs, there's really not a lot left in the pie. It's almost, if you add these percentages up, the remaining costs, we're almost at like 95% of our budget is fixed in a lot of ways. So the remaining piece of the pie is almost, the discretionary spending when you look at professional development, some level of supplies and materials of what we're doing is really less than $1 million in some cases when you look at a school budget. Do you want to talk about enrollment? I know it's been asked about our enrollment. So our enrollment is staying relatively the same when we look at where we are at pre-K through grade 12 this year, 2,327 students. When we look at our projections and we throw it into our formula of how we project enrollment, and we've been doing that pretty accurately, we're going to see a slight increase next year at 2,337 students. So not a big change. There is some fluctuations between grade levels at elementary level going slightly up. Middle school level expected to increase by about 30, the largest increase by like 30, 31, 32 students next year, and high school expected to decline by about 15 or 20 students. So but it nets out to about a 10 student change amongst all the grade levels. And then as you can see, we're going to stay relatively static, relatively similar, not a lot of changes. Then we start to increase 5 years out when we get to 2030 and beyond and get closer to that 2,400 number that we were at for many, many years. So some of the staffing restoration priorities, I think this slide speaks a little bit to Mr. Simons' question in public comment. It was, if we were recommending restoration to some of the reductions of last year, what we feel maybe had the greatest impact on positions we reduced because of the failed override, from the administration's point of view, is these positions and this impact of reductions we think have had certainly an impact on our services. We talked about the general paraprofessional support at the kindergarten level, and you heard from professional staff a couple of weeks ago, as we mentioned earlier, and what that impact meant, and they articulated it really, really well, that not having that support in every kindergarten classroom, we have some shared general para support between classrooms now at the school, has had an impact at this early childhood level where providing that support is so important. Being able to have early intervention strategies and intervene at an early age is very important. So when you lose that extra support, it can certainly have an impact. So that's certainly a priority, and we've heard from the staff on that throughout the school year. We did reduce a classroom teacher at the elementary level, so there was one elementary cohort that's above our recommended guideline of 18 to 22, no more than 22 students, at a lower grade level at one of the schools. So that would be a priority to maintain what we feel like that class size has always been an important piece of what we do. And then what we felt was, really a big, I guess, bang for buck was having these academic support tutors, which were brought in with some COVID ESSER funding in 2021. We really felt like that there was a lot of positive things happening there. And they were really addressing early intervention strategies in math and literacy and at the elementary level, and they were really assisting. So losing these 15-hour per week academic support tutors has had an impact. So from the administration perspective, there was a lot more on that reduction list, but we felt these were, if we were recommending restoration, and as you can see by that blurb, there's reasons why we're not, because we are still facing a large deficit and funding challenges. These would be some of the top priority restoration positions that you'd be hearing from administration, school principals, directors, certainly Dr. Daly, Mr. Colleen. When you look at our 2030 initiative, so if we were kind of doing our typical preliminary budget presentation, we would be looking to fund some of these initiatives. We've always kind of done that at the preliminary level. And this was a position that was in the budget last year. It was a reduction to balance, but this first table, adding the school adjustment counselor to address certainly mental health for all students, would have provided a designated school adjustment counselor at every elementary level. So we didn't quite get there. There's still one shared between the Hood and the Little elementary school. So that continues to be would be the highest of priorities. And we heard that in our budget deliberations from the elementary school principals in particular. Some of the other priorities, again, that we would have looked to do if we were recommending our strategic plan initiatives would be that academic interventionists. We just spoke of the importance the tutors had, and we wanted to enhance that model with professional staff to provide that direct intervention strategy to help us move the district forward. So even having one of those that would be either shared at elementary schools or at the middle school, in addition to those tutors, would have been a significant enhancement. And then addressing math, early intervention in math. I know Mr. Queen has advocated for this a lot. Would be an important step that would be part of our strategic plan. And then looking at our continuing the effort of our model to add the humanities coordinator. So we've seen a lot of impact, huge impact with the STEM coordinator, and the humanities coordinator would have been that next step that we've had to defer that request as well. So our curriculum leadership model to align curriculum to move the district forward, to provide support, professional development support, modeling support to our teachers would have been significant. So when we look at our budget request that's on the table, the general fund request, again, is a little more than $2.2 million. Again, that was a 5.6% increase. It is a level services budget, as we have defined. I talked about grants and revolving accounts. So if we were to add our grant offsets, our user fee offsets, we would add 3.7 million. And they're in all school funding between what these offsets are and what our general fund request would be would be a budget of a little bit more than 45 million. And as we typically know, we get a variety of donations. The annual average, if we look back 5 years, is about 250,000 that comes in from support groups, private groups, businesses, parents, PTOs, PTAs, supporting technology, supporting athletics, supporting the arts program, performing arts, fine arts, supporting classroom materials at times, doing a lot of things. The annual average is 250,000 additional. And then the PTO also has in-kind budgets that they're just doing on their own in terms of providing teacher support, materials for teachers, basic classroom supplies, doing enrichment programs that they do. Their annual budget of in-kind gifts is about $75,000. So that's also going on as well. This is a little table that just kind of breaks down the changes from how we got from our FY25 final approved budget and where we're at with our request. So contractual salary obligations going up by about 1.77 million, a little bit more than that. That's out of our 5.6%, that accounts for 4.5%. Special education out of district tuitions, the need to meet the additional 6 students and some of these rate increases we're seeing was 0.7% increase of the 5.6. The transportation and contractual services need to the additional students and the high rates that the special education transportation contract from FY '24 to '25, and again, that's kind of carrying forward into '26, was a 30% rate increase. So that certainly had an impact. When we have higher special ed costs, it's always sort of a year behind, a year catch-up, but you also are going to get additional circuit breaker offset. So we're seeing that, so that would reduce the number of some of these special ed tuition and transportation costs. So that number is reflected for next year. And then we have our fixed costs like the busing, regular busing, utilities, maintenance, contracts that are going up, was a little over 145,000. We're also trying to, because of those increases, trying to capture as much of an offset in our revolving account for busing without increasing the fee. And in our IDEA grant, which has helped offset busing costs as well, we're trying to capture more of that funding in that grant because of these increases. So we're kind of pushing the envelope a little bit with those offsets, but we're trying to see what we can do. And then there's been just supply and classroom material increases, just for some software that's increasing, materials that are going up. Some of these inflationary increases we've had to adjust for when we look at our trends for next year. So that all accounts to the $2.2 million increase in our level services request. So if we look at our budget gap, salaries and expenses breakdown, $41,377,801 request, 5.6 higher than fiscal year '25. The most current revenue plan as of the last Friday, that budget gap is a little bit more than $1.4 million, 1.433045. I believe. There might have been like a $4,000 adjustment like in the last minute, but that's essentially, I think, is what we're looking at. I think that's the latest number that I got from the town. Yeah, the $1,433,045 is the budget gap. Again, we're talking level services. So I just want to take a moment out of our offsets. We talk about, we have bus transportation, athletics, extracurricular, performing arts, kindergarten, preschool. These are what we charge user fees for. So there was a time, and I've shown this before, when we were at 50% or higher, the user fee contribution was helping offset that cost. Because nothing gets cheaper, and we've tried to maintain our non-increased user fees, although we have done that the last couple of years in some of these areas, it hasn't kept pace with those costs. So you can see in some cases we're down to like 30, 32, 33%. The averaging aggregate of the offsets at 36%. So I know I've been asked before, if we were to put everything at 50, what would some of these user fees be at? And we can look at that again if there's a desire to do that. But certainly, it's a challenge. And we did increase the athletic user fee last year. We did increase the bus user fee the last couple of years. We're looking at performing arts to see if there's a need to increase fees there. And then the kindergarten, I think we'll talk about. It would be our desire to have free universal kindergarten. That was not achieved. It's not been achieved. We've been working towards reducing that, but I think there will be conversations about whether or not we have to increase that tuition this year.
Mr. Connolly, we'll hold questions to the end, but just one quick clarification, just on the percentage in particular. Bus transportation and preschool are a little bit different because there's students in there that it's required, so there's no fee charged to them. So
Correct.
I'm assuming they're still in that mix, right? Because you're not pulling out the people that are required to be bused or
That's correct. Yes,
Okay.
I'm not.
So like, we're not gonna get to 50% for some of them, because
Correct.
if there's students that
correct.
we have to bus, we can't charge a fee to them. If there's
Right.
students that have to be given preschool, so those two are gonna be a little bit different than the
Yeah,
other
that's
ones.
correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. Just, I show this chart every year, just get a sense of what we did get approved in previous years and where our request stands to previous requests. With the October adjustment, the additional $399 in change that the school received for special education unforeseen costs, our request last year ended up getting up to 5%. But you can kind of see where we've been. You see those higher costs since 2022, coming out of COVID and the pandemic. The 10-year average is 3.9%, and we are looking at 5.6 currently. I won't spend a lot of time on this because some of it's been presented before, but we do try to save costs as much as possible. So we're looking at every stone unturned to see where can we have cost avoidance, where can we reduce the budget. I think we do a lot to control our operational costs, our fixed costs, just with maintenance, with our daily vigilance on just our operations and how we conduct our business and what we're trying to do from a maintenance and operations perspective, trying to purchase from state bid lists, consortiums, using regionalized transportation contracts to share costs with other districts, with SEAM, modulating our boilers and our gas contracts with the purchasing consortium agreement, doing whatever we can to control these costs, really to shift as much of their piece of the pie to instructional and to students, as these are all a lot of these are operational. Use of multifunctioning school activity buses internally to save on high contractual costs for athletics and extracurricular transportation, doing whatever we can in-house as much as possible. We now have our food service program has been performing very, very well under the Universal Free Lunch Program. So we're now offsetting revenue in that program for cleaning and utilities, which we never were doing before. There's a certain ratio you have to, or indirect costs you can do that from, and we're trying to stay within that. There's an issue of being audited this month, we'll find out. But we're doing whatever we can to control those costs. So what can you conclude from our budget? Again, not really a fancy budget here, but it's a level services budget. We're meeting our contractual obligations with employees and employee unions. We're meeting our fixed cost increases for contractual services, maintenance items, busing, utilities, and we're maintaining staff, not adding staff, to maintain educationally sound student-teacher ratios, especially at the elementary level. Trying to make sure there's adequate health and safety services for all students and staff in the community. Even though we saw some reduction there, we don't want to see any further reduction. We're trying to maintain. We maintain current structures to address social and emotional and mental health needs. And we're maintaining staff in certainly our specialized programs to support these students in our high needs population. Continuing the one-to-one student device program. As we look at that number 4 area, that's something that's very fluid at the moment. We have a growing ELL population, ESL population, so we're looking at how to deliver, in a lot of cases, these mandating services and how to do it as efficiently as we can. So this could be a need to increase some staffing there to meet some of this need as we look at things again and review the staffing needs of these students in these high needs populations. We do have the one-to-one program, that's continuing. We have our operational costs for student transportation for athletics and fine arts programs. We're meeting those needs. And then we're just, again, trying to make sure we have the funding to maintain our 5 schools and campuses. So I spoke of earlier, we're getting towards the end, $1.4 million in change budget gap. We are certainly have work to do to balance that gap. What would be some of the long-term budget implications to balance this deficit as it sits? This is something that we're going to be deliberating over the next several weeks with school committee budget workshops and public hearings and budget webinars that are all coming up later this month. But I think we'd be looking at higher class sizes at all levels, certainly at the elementary level. You'd be looking at reduced overall breadth of the curriculum and depth of the course options at the middle school and the high school. Could see reductions in some programming, reduced ability to address student health issues and nursing coverage, potentially less digital learning and technology staff, and less the ability to address tech support issues, less support staff available for academic support and early intervention strategies. We don't want to further reduce that staffing, as I mentioned earlier. potentially the less extracurricular and athletic opportunities for students. That's really where a lot of those students thrive, so we don't want to see those impacted anymore. Potentially a reduction in resources available for the classroom. There could be just a lack of funds for available unforeseen building maintenance needs, as we've had extraordinarily small capital equipment needs. Those could have to be reduced, and then there's just less of our ability to address the unforeseen. Could be increased fees I think we'd have to talk about increased fees. No one wants to talk about it. I don't know how we would avoid it with a budget gap like 1.4 million, so we'd have to look at fees to families like athletics, performing arts, transportation, tuition-based programs. And what this all does, it just creates higher risk of budget overages and increased reliance on special revenue accounts and so forth. So our next steps, this is night one in the budget process. Preliminary budget, getting the budget out there, posting it for the community to review. We're certainly going to talk with the finance planning team, chairs and vice chairs, to see what the available revenues are. It's a fluid process, as we know. There's a budget webinar on March 26th. I'll be posting some budget videos, and we'll slow this year in getting those up, but I'll be posting some additional short budget videos. Joint meeting with the boards on March 26th, I believe. That's set for 6:30 in this room. Budget workshop is set for April 7th at 5 p.m., right before the public hearing at 7 p.m. A second workshop would be set for April 28th prior to a potential vote right now scheduled for April 28th. Finance committee we'd have to meet for, usually it's like a week after we vote. Town meeting, I believe, is June 9th, and then we're continuing to wait any changes in the state budget. And then we're gonna discuss. So that, I'll open up to any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Connolly. Excellent job as always. So I have a million questions and comments, but I'm gonna let everybody else go first. So I'm gonna, with that?
Why don't we open it? Do you want to get theirs, ours?
Well, I'm gonna start with the school committee members first, and then members of the public can have comments. Jen, since I don't want to forget you, do you have any questions or thoughts first? I know. Do we hear any snoring?
Sorry, no, I guess I'm looking for more specific. We know this is the first meeting, but as we go through all those cuts, there are, there the potential cuts and reductions. They're absolutely devastating. So I just know that this is this first night, and hope the community comes out and people participate and see what could possibly happen here with our gap.
Yep. Thank you. Mr. Friedman, anything?
For an initial meeting, I'm not going to have as much, other than to say, a lot of the things we've been talking about, we're going, it's not that we're moving, it's not that we're holding still, we're actually going to go backward. Like kindergarten costs. But, as a budget like this, as you can see, most of these are fixed costs. I mean, you can't not pay your contract. You can't just say, oh, well, we're just going to reduce costs for special ed or for whatever. So, it's sort of not like a household budget. You're mandated by law to do this. So, I don't want to get into big speech time, but I don't have a lot of questions at this point because we are going to get into a lot more detail as we go further into the process. Thank you for putting this together, Mr. Conley.
Thank you, Noel.
Not so much questions at this point, just comments. First, obviously, thank you to Mr. Connolly for just the great presentation and just making it digestible and clear here. And what's clear is that there's not a lot of wiggle room in terms of just like Jeff said, we don't. A lot of this, it can't. The numbers are the numbers, and there's very little wiggle room. And of course, looking at the restoration priorities, it's so hard to see that as something that is not going to be restored without an override. Just It's so important, especially, you know, the paraprofessionals and some of the academic support. So not so much questions now, but just seeing the numbers is as always, very sobering. So you can hear what your questions are. You always have good ones.
Mr. Sutherland, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, a few. So again, thank you for putting this together. I took the opportunity to kind of compare this to the budget books of some of our peer towns that you point out in here, and this thing blows it away. And not only in how we put it together, but also when I look at how the budget is broken down, and I look at what other towns are spending on various components, I find very little ways I can go and criticize the way that we're allocating our budget per student, and looking at how DESI allocates it, it makes a lot of sense to me. So I guess I'd, give kind of my opinion on, I know we haven't made any decisions, and we're obviously looking at $1.4 million, but the things that I see in this budget, I saw on, I think it was on Facebook, right, the kindergarten class was at the food pantry the other week, right, their yearly trip to the food pantry. That's an awful lot of kids for 4 teachers, right? And that's what stood out to me when I saw that picture, was there are 4 people responsible for all of those kids that are in that picture, and it's not gonna get better next year. We know that going in. That was very sobering to me going into this budget cycle. But then secondly, knowing that we're watching our special ed costs go up and up and up every year, and every dollar that we don't invest in identifying problems early only contributes to what I think I called a death spiral earlier in January, right? We're spending more money on special education, more money on those costs, but now we're not investing any money up front to try to identify it early, where it's quite honestly, it's cheaper, right? We can solve problems earlier, we can get students off of that IEP path early in their academic career, and everything we're hearing, the adjustments that we'll be talking about making are in those early years. So all we're doing is making the problem harder in the future. So I think the community needs to be aware of that. I think we need to do a better job this year of engaging with the community. We'll get to that during social media in a little bit here. But we've got to start engaging the community. These are the areas that we're looking at. And then, we look at priorities. My last comment or thought, Scott, as we look at priorities, I think user fees are a necessity. We really have to look long and hard at we're talking about 50%. I mean, we might have to look at, higher than 50% without making what I would consider catastrophic cuts to our overall. Like, we've got to prioritize the students in the classroom. That's the majority of their day. And what's unfortunate is, having been here so many nights this year, this school runs from 7 a.m. till 10 p.m. every day, right? There are kids learning in here until 10 p.m. every day. And it's just really unfortunate that we can't find a way around this problem. But I think, user fees, and when we're looking at the overarching, our priorities have to be educating our students, preparing them for life outside of high school. And we've got to have to start looking at some of these harder things that may increase fees in other ways for families that, quite candidly, I think it's terrible that we have to even talk about it, but I don't see another way around it.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Sutherland. Okay, I'm not gonna get in my soapbox about funding and everything else. I just have a lot of comments to make going through the full budget book and a few questions. So the first thing, just to set the tone, understand that last year we cut 15.7 positions that would have been level services and 12.5 for level staffing. So 12.5 positions for level staffing, and we're proposing not restoring, but trying to do level staffing again. Few random questions, some that we'll talk about probably in the workshop, but I think we need to increase building rental rates. It said that we were keeping, the budget assumes that we're keeping that the same, and it's 75,000 total. I think that's something that I'd like to have a conversation about. I think if the town ties into the wastewater treatment system, I don't think the $200,000 expense for that should stay on the school side. I think that's another discussion we have to have about that, because we shouldn't be, the school shouldn't, that should either go above the line, or it probably should go above the line, because if we're now going to be maintaining the wastewater for multiple buildings, I don't think that should stay within the school budget. I think that should come out. I think what would be really helpful is if we could show somewhere the number of hours of education provided. And I don't just mean it's 181 days of school, but like how many different classes are being done. So if there's 8 third grade classes, every hour is 8 hours of education. Because a lot of, when we're looking at the municipal side, a lot of times it's like, oh, these are the number of hours that are being provided of classes or things like that. And where people are saying, well, the school's getting 2/3 of of the budget, and the municipal is getting 1/3, but if you look at the number of hours of education we are providing in a variety of different subject areas, I think that's an important number to have. It's just to show that, like, we're open, 7.5 hours a day, but there's so many different classes and different needs. I think it would be really important to show the number of hours that are being provided in maybe different areas or things like that.
You're talking like a value statement type of thing.
Sort of, because I think back to when we were in school, a lot of times, like, we had a school day, but I'd have 4 or 5 classes in 2 study halls, and our students are not doing that right now. And, they're getting robotics on top of that. They're getting foreign language, on top of that. And
MTSS.
right, I think it's just important that we, contextualize that a little bit differently. And so I'd really love to see, because if we have this many sections of classes going on at the time, because what we're talking about potentially is removing programs. Like, just to be clear, we're talking about removing programs for this coming year. I'm not going to identify programs at this one, but there are programs that would be cut. And so it won't be as many hours being provided anymore. And so I think it's good to think about that, because do we as a community want our kids sitting in study halls all day? We send them to school to sit there in a study hall as opposed to learning something. And so I think it would be important to track that. I think a couple of the charts, I'll talk to you separately about this, Michael, but like a couple of the charts show like each year the differences. But I think having a cumulative number of like each year we've cut some of these things, being able to show those, like page 40 was one where we're just showing like a couple of years there's been cuts in those areas, but showing the cumulative effect year over year, that it's like, oh, this year we cut 4 positions, and then this year we cut 12.5 positions, and then, pretty soon it starts to become very, very substantial. I agree with Mr. Sutherland. I think we need to look very carefully at user fees. On page 112 of the budget book, we talk about how much of the revolving accounts are being used. And if you look at that, if you take school lunch out of that, which is a different thing, there's $400,000 that we used from the revolving accounts this year. So we brought in $400,000 less in revenue than we spent. And so that's a challenge that we have to get over. And that goes to the percentage that you were talking about. But if you put a dollar amount on it, we spent from revolving accounts $400,000 more than we brought in.
Yeah.
And so that's a real problem that we have to get around. For parents listening, we were advocating for an override to try to fix some of these issues. I think one of the things that people have to realize is if we're not going to fund it across the board, it's going to fall more on parents. It's going to fall on services that are not required, athletics, performing arts, things like that. And again, the reality is if our taxes went up, a lot of families are in bigger homes, they'd be paying more in taxes anyway. So it's just going to probably have to be a shift to user fees as opposed to just eliminating, dozens of teaching positions each year. But yeah, but the revolving account, even to get back, the idea of a revolving account is that when you have a very big increase, like the bus increase this year, the idea would be you can use a revolving account to spread that over a couple of years. We shouldn't be taking out $400,000 more than we've put in. And that's across many, many different revolving accounts. Quick question for you, Mr. Connolly. The percentage of 8th graders going to the high school, that dropped again. Before the new building, we were at about 86%, moved on from 8th grade to 9th grade. That got up to about 95%, and it's been back down to about 86%.
Yeah.
Is this kids going to more like private schools? Are they going to charter, to different, tech schools, things like that? Do you know where that other,
Yeah,
it's dropped about 10%.
we do collect that data. It's a little bit of a combination of the two. It's some private schools in the area, or there's some virtual schools that, for various reasons, students elect to get, to go into at that stage. But that trend's typical with a new building. If something's around 86, 87, 80%, new building comes in, there's excitement, that drops, and then after 10 years, it starts to level off back then. So we've seen that in other places.
So that was a number that actually stuck out in my head. I didn't know if we we're going to get into that. Is that also common to, forgetting the new building, is where we are now, is that common to the region as well? Is that roughly, are we higher, lower, roughly?
Yeah, I can pull some of that data. My understanding is that we've always been
It seems
higher,
like,
more higher than lower.
yeah,
It's a pretty good number.
Than typical. We
yeah,
don't
it
lose-
seems like it's a pretty good number.
Yeah.
But I just don't get a sense of comparison.
I think we've always been higher. I mean, we're fortunate we don't have a lot of charter schools in the area. But we've maintained a lot of those progression ratios from schools and from grade level.
Well, it just helps us to plan and look ahead. Like, if we were planning on 95% going to the high school, we have to plan for that. If it's more like 86%, there was an old colleague of ours that used to talk about right-sizing things. And so, Mr. McGowan used to say that. And so we, again, just thinking about what that is. And so, yeah, but that just stood out to me that we're kind of back down to like the 86%. One thing that wasn't called out here is our per pupil spending is still less than the state average. We're 2.6% less than the state average. So it's not that we're spending way more than everybody else. We are still spending less on our students. And the reality is we're doing a really good job with, less than the state average for that. Our class sizes are above the state average by a little bit more now. I mean, it's, average class size is 18.3 versus 17.2 for the state average. I understand people like to throw out there's the 10 or 11 or 12 number, but that's people in the building, that's not class sizes. And so,
That includes one-on-one assistance, that includes,
correct.
yeah.
The average class size, and this was 2023, I think, and so it's probably getting even worse. But it was like 18.3 versus state average 17.2. And what was that? Was that 2023 numbers, I believe?
24.
24, okay. But yeah, 18.3 versus 17.2. So our class sizes have gone up again. And then just within the assumptions of the budget, I want to call out some things and just, ask a couple questions on these things. But one assumption was that the kindergarten fee stays the same at $2,500, which again, of course, is something that I think we have to look at. Health insurance, the assumption in the budget is 14% for a health insurance increase, just to point that out. And if I recall, Mr. Freeman, correct me if I'm wrong, or Mr. Kelleher, I believe every 1% is about $110,000 in the budget. So a 14% increase is a $1.5 million increase in the budget. Mm-hmm. So, when revenues go up 2.5% and health insurance goes up 14%, like, we are fortunate to have a PFA where we can deal with some of that, but still, we're going to be budgeting within the budget about 10 to 10.5%.
It also has a wonderful knock-on effect when you start talking about contracts, because that then, because it all gets pushed back to the people that are paying it.
Right.
They then look for more in their contract to offset these sorts of things. So it's not just a town budget thing.
Right.
It will come back to directly to schools and salaries.
Yep.
So.
I mean, the assumption is a 3.5% increase in special education cost. I find that hard to believe that it's going to stay at 3.5%, frankly. I just worry that it's going to be more than
Yeah,
that.
we've seen already even some collaboratives that we've worked with that have posted higher.
Or more than that. And, yeah, and then just the last thing is just a call out, 18.4% of North Reading students are receiving some sort of special education that, and as you pointed out, 46 out-of-district placements, which is the highest we've had since we've been in any of the charts that you had. And 23% of our spending goes to special education. So, again, as Mr. Sutherland was pointing out, if we cut some of the services, this is just going to get worse. I mean, if we are continuing to cut things that eliminate special education costs in the future, it's just going to continue to escalate. So, again, this is just kind of pointing out for the public in the initial presentation a few things that I don't think were highlighted there. And we'll talk later about ways in which to address this. Dr. Daly.
Through you. Just a couple of points. Great presentation, Michael. Not only is it, no restorations, no NRPS 2030, we're also not following through on our Student Opportunity Act, which under state law, we need to have a plan. Our plan is, I say this every year, the goal that the state recommends is to eliminate pre-K fees. We've asked for special permission to work on our kindergarten fee because we're one of only about 12 districts that have a fee. And we're talking about not only not reducing it, but possibly needing to increase it. As you pointed out, enrollment overall numbers are down slightly. I think it's important to note that in the last 5 years, we've seen like an 18% increase in high-need students. So that's a group that looks at low-income It looks at English learners, it looks at special education. So the number of students may be down, but a huge increase in the needs of the students that we're serving. Positions that didn't even exist 5 years ago, we had, the beginning, we started to add an adjustment counselor. We're now still trying to get 1.0 at every building. As you noted, we're not adding that person at every building, but those are critical positions. You talk to any administrator, any parent, you ask any parent whether their kids are having a little bit of anxiety, I think everyone's hand goes up. Those adjustment counselors are critical to our schools, and those are positions that didn't exist in the past. So when you look at where we are as a district now, coming in asking for level services, as was pointed out, we're really just talking about providing the same services that we've done this year. We had to cut a lot last year to get to where we are, and now we're still talking about $1.4 million in cuts on top of that, which would be devastating. It's going to affect all areas. I will also just add to his list, it's certainly going to impact administrative oversight as well. I mean, we're going to look everywhere for places we have to reduce.
Yeah, and again, I appreciate there's a challenge on the municipal side as well. Certainly appreciate that, but last year, I believe there was a lot of, open positions cut and things like that, and, the historical split was based on the services that are being provided. It was based on the number of students that we have and reasonable class sizes, and it's not that we're prioritizing one group of people in the town over another, it's that we have an obligation as a town to educate the students. The idea of local apprentice, is that you are, we're putting our children into the schools and we have an obligation to educate them, and, I just worry that we're starting to fail that in our obligation to do that. And so we just need to really make sure that we're, cognizant of each year that we continue to make cuts. That's why I really want to see like the hours that are being provided. And so, okay, I'll get off my soapbox and open it up to public comments. And Mr. McGowan, I see your hand raised.
Hi, Rich McGowan, 46 Chestnut Street. Mr. Buckley, I have a couple of questions, but on your point you were just talking about, do we know where the community stands versus other communities on that municipal school split on revenue? I don't know, Tim, if you saw that when you were looking at other budget books.
In finance planning team, we've asked this question before, and Mr. Gilberto has said, I don't want to, if he's listening, I'm paraphrasing, but I believe he said that it's very consistent to other towns, where, when you look at the size of the district, he said it's been very comparable, 2/3, 1/3.
Yeah, I would assume that was true.
Yeah.
If you don't mind, I have 2 or 3 questions.
Go ahead. We're here for. Yeah.
I think we're within 1 to 2 points either way, because I do remember seeing that.
I remember we asked about it, we
Yeah.
talked about it, but I don't remember seeing
I mean,
it.
if you look at just the surrounding towns, they're nearly identical to Wilmington, Andover, Linfield.
Percentage-wise, yes.
Percentage-wise. In virtually every percentage, even the sub-breakdown of the way taxes are brought in, the way, the distribution of teacher salaries, it's almost identical, even as you start looking at the subcategories.
Yeah.
Michael, this is a little more looking forward than to this year's budget, but on your enrollment projections, when a new development comes in, what is the lag time between the houses being sold and, beginning to see students enter the school system?
Yeah, it's a tough, it could be like 2 to 3 years.
It's pretty quick, right? It's
That's kind of what we use.
you get some people who move in who already have kids, and then others who move in and then have kids or have younger kids.
Yeah.
I was just thinking, because there's a 13-house subdivision across the street from our house, and
Yep.
it's coming online this year, and it's going to impact. In terms of direct grants from the federal government paid directly to the district, what is, given everything we've heard in the news recently coming out of the administration in Washington, what is that dollar amount on repeating grants, not ones that you apply for and get a special grant, but
Yeah.
on an annual grant basis, how much money comes directly into the district, not into the state, but directly to the district from the federal government?
So we're in that like $3 million range when you look at all of our grants. I'm gonna pull it up right here.
Page 110.
So the offset between grants and fees is that 3.7 million.
Okay,
And the breakdown between what we rely on in revolving and grants on that, I want to say trying to pull it up exactly, find the right page in the budget book. But it's,
Page 110 has some.
yeah, 1/10 what I'm looking at. It's about a little over 2 million of that is grants, and then the remainder of that is revolving.
okay, so
It's
that's,
like it's like a 2.2, $1.5 million split in what that offset is.
okay. So that's funding that is perhaps less reliable than it might have been in the past, based on what we're hearing. I know you're going to have a budget update for this year later on, but just looking ahead to special education prepayments at the beginning of next year, do you have a sense of what that target is looking like? Is it higher,
Yeah.
lower, the same as previous years?
So this budget does assume that we're gonna prepay $150,000 at the end of this school year with
Yep.
prepaid tuitions. That's been about the target. And that's the number we're using and assuming that when we built this budget.
Yep.
So that tuition line's already being offset by 150,000. We're seeing added costs crop up this year, more than typical.
Sure.
So I think it's gonna be tighter to achieve that number. I'm not saying, I don't think we're at risk at the moment not to, but in the past, we've been able to exceed it
Right.
somewhat, and then it provides an extra level of flexibility. And I'm not seeing that being a possibility right now with what we're seeing.
Okay. Thanks. And great job as always. Thanks.
Thanks, Richard.
Chairman?
Dr. Daly.
Just to respond to that too, one of the concerns I have nationally, people need to pay attention to little things, even if they're block grants, because anything that changes the formula, North Reading is going to be it's going to be harder for us.
Yep.
Right, because, even if anything follows that Student Opportunity Act formula where we break even, we get nothing more. If other districts need more, they're going to get dollars out, switch their way. And so I just have a lot of concerns with that piece. So it's not even the cutting of the funds, it's even just the way they're discussed and appropriated to the state.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Other questions or thoughts or comments from public?
Something both you and Tim mentioned, that the number that jumped out at me a lot was about a 15% increase in out-of-district placements from this year to next that you expect. And that always concerns me, as having been a very big advocate of inclusion in our schools. And the point's very well taken, Tim, that the investment that's made from day one has huge impacts on the success of the individuals as they go through the system and beyond. And just to put to toot North Reading's horn here, as an aside, my wife Pat and I were invited to speak to parents of students that are about to graduate from the Riverview School on Cape Cod, which is where Nate went after he graduated here from North Reading. So my son Nathan, for those that don't know, was part of the North Reading school system from age 3 to graduation, and fully included right through. Has Down syndrome, moderate intellectual disabilities, and his experience here was top notch. And he had supports from before the little school reopened, back at Seam Daycare, all the way through the batch and on, and had lots of good support that we advocated for, but we got there, and the result has been just amazing. And Pat and I spoke to this panel of students, of parents of students who are now turning 22. They're going to be out in the world pretty soon, and just don't know what to do next. What's going to happen to my kid that's now leaving the school system, and we were the senior citizens of the crew. So Nate's 15 years removed from Riverview School, which means he's 18 years removed from here. It's pretty mind-boggling. But they were just blown away, as we have always been, with his success. I mean, he is working full-time. He lives in his own apartment. Huge success story, because I'll draw the straight line. I know it's hard to draw the straight line from these supports and, advocating for students that should stay in the district rather than go to out-of-district placements. There's lots of individual situations, and I'm not going to say that, it's 100% should be here. But when the supports are there and the kids are able to be educated in their home districts, in their neighborhood schools, and get those kinds of supports, they are on their way. And Nate's a great example of that. And it really frightens me to see some of these things, that would have to go, these supports that, some of your elementary and kindergarten teachers talked about, or some of the things on the list of things that would have to go if this budget gap can't get closed. Those are people's lives, independence, tax, successful tax-paying citizens in the future that we're impacting their lives by seeing this kind of stuff not be the way it ought to be. So that's my 2 cents.
I would just add, sometimes people look at like the number of students in the building, the capacity is whatever, and we're at 82% of the capacity, but sometimes we're able to do smaller subsection classrooms. We're able to keep students in district because we have the space to do it. And I think we struggle occasionally at elementary schools where, if you get too many kids in there, there's not enough spaces. Like we've, with the modular units failing right now, like we're not using the modular at the little school right now. That's space that could be used that can't be rented out, can't be used for various things. There are a lot of challenges we have, but it's not even just a 15% increase right now. I mean, just a few years ago, we got to the lowest number of out-of-district placements. We got down to 28, and now we're up to 46. And that's just I was looking for the page number or whatever, but that was like in 5 years, I think we went from 28 to 56, or 46, excuse me, and so.
I will say, we're not alone in that.
No.
When we saw that presentation. I don't want people to get the impression that we are wildly unusual in that. Still concerning, and everything you're saying is correct. I just wanted to give a little
We're not alone in anything. I mean, the challenge is, and it's just a matter of how's the community going to address the issues.
Right.
Mr. Kelleher, Jeff, will you pass it over to him?
Yep. Done.
Scott, just to follow up on that comment, I wonder if we looked at the texture of the kids that are going out of district versus staying in, and you say it has increased. Is it, or do we know how much of that is prompted by us cutting back on services versus kids coming into the district that we never would have been able to provide those services for anyway, that they just need to be out of district?
I mean, I think it's kind of, Dr. Dale, well, I was going to say, we had a few meetings ago, we had the Director of Student Services come in, and we were talking a lot about special education. And one of the big issues is you have to have a cohort of students. And so, but what I just remember is we used to get tuition from some collaboratives for renting space out. And even if we had one student, we might be able to find 3 other students, and it would be through the SEAM Collaborative, and they would be renting the space. Yep. But for the student in North Reading, they're still in the home district, And so, I don't know, Dr. Dale, if you want to add.
Yeah, I was speak to that point that, in order to keep a student in district, we need to have like peers to have a program to save the cost. But students with disabilities, certainly a reason for outplacement, medical, right? And then mental health. Those are sort of 3 big buckets. I think we're seeing an increase in, not to overstate it, but with the mental health piece. And I think I see a direct through line with the supports needed with adjustment counselors and all the supports, paraprofessionals, interventionists, all those pieces that they can help students with along the way. Larger class sizes, all of those things have a ripple effect on students that are having anxiety, having issues being in school day to day, that then this program no longer works for them, right? And so I that is a clear difference now than it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago. I think some of those students are, like you said, they might move to town and they have a medical outplacement and there's no supports we can provide here. So there is a piece of that there. But I see a huge connection with that. And certainly with the, with disabilities as well, right? So when we can offer a program here, when we can offer smaller class sizes with more individualized attention, interventionists, all those supports that we've talked about, that helps with students with disabilities as well. So we can try to quantify that a little bit more, but it's a little bit tricky getting into it because then it gets personalized with individual cases.
Yeah, I wasn't
But,
asking for
yeah,
that
no,
kind of
no.
detail. I was just curious as to
Yeah.
what's the dynamic? What's
Yeah.
happening? Is it that we just aren't providing what we used to provide because we don't have the resources?
Yeah.
Or there are kids that just have bigger challenges?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit more of the latter. I don't think we've had direct cuts to a program that now we can no longer provide, but I think part of it is just that ability to have people, able to remain in school through other means, not just by cutting a program, but by ancillary pieces that are not there to support them along the way.
But even when you look through the budget book and you see class sizes, you see some very small class sizes. Some of those are classes that we're keeping special education students in the district where they're small classes with, extra teachers in there and paraprofessionals. So people may look and say, oh, there's class sizes of whatever, but sometimes that's how you're keeping them there, and you have the space to do it in some buildings, which is a good thing, and if that were to go away, it would be even more expensive.
Yeah, it's a good thing for the kids, and it's a
Right.
good thing for the budget, for
Correct.
cost.
Correct.
We could probably quantify that the other way, too. How many students have we kept in? How many programs have we created? This is something that we're doing all the time, and Cynthia Conant and Gina Sacco are constantly coming up with, if we do this, this, and this, and maybe pull these, we can create something and keep 2 or 3 kids in. I mean, that's constant conversation that we're having as well.
I think the other thing we need to consider, and we're talking about very specific use cases here, but the simplest one for me, Don, too, is a child that may be thriving in a class of 18 is now no longer thriving in a class of 22. And now we have 4 students at risk across an entire cohort that we were able to give supports to that would keep them down a traditional curriculum path that we now have to find intervention, IEP, whatever the path is for that student, which then gets into that 23% of the budget that we're talking about. And that one just doesn't get talked about at all either, right? Those
Well,
4
it's also-
students, they need that help.
You also don't even see that right away, right? I mean,
Right.
these are kids often too young to even test. And so you wouldn't even see the impact of that for maybe 2 or 3 years. So it's difficult to talk about that through line as you make these budget. I mean, that's why we have to be vocal about it, because the impact is a carry-on effect.
Yeah. I guess my last point here, and if anybody online has any comments, raise your hand as well, guys. I would just say it's a town issue. We've been trying to work very well with the select board, through finance planning team. I mean, a lot of towns don't do that. They go and they fight on town floor, and, we've tried not to do that. We're not trying to shift the problem to somebody else and say, well, we have needs, so we should cut all these other things on the other side. We're trying to work with the select board, work with the finance planning team to try to find a fair resolution. And, I just think people are going to be upset, and people should be upset. And there are no easy decisions that are going to be made. Some parents are going to be upset that there were 3 classes of 17, and now there's going to be 2 of 25. People aren't going to be happy if there are students in a class of 25 in the elementary school. People aren't going to be happy if a program goes away. People aren't going to be happy when user fees rise significantly. But there are no good decisions at this point in time. Everything that we've advocated for is up for debate right now. And, we're literally arguing against cutting programs, cutting teachers, raising class sizes, raising user fees. There are no good solutions here. And so it's good for people to get involved and, advocate for where they want it. But the one thing I would just say is, if you're going to reach out and say, we shouldn't cut this, you have to tell me what we should cut, because that's where we're at. We either have to raise the revenue or we have to cut the expenses. And if we're not raising the revenue, we need to cut it. But, it's great to say we shouldn't cut this one, but something has to be cut. We have $1.4 million to cut right now. And so that's kind of where we're at, and, sets the stage for the next couple of months, I guess. Other comments, questions, thoughts? If not, we will move on. Okay, this is not the hearing, but please stay involved, everybody, and we look to see more people here. Okay, we just have routine matters. The minutes, who would like to lead us in the minutes?
I can do that. Just finding them. Move to approve meeting minutes from the February 11th, 2025 open session.
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second, any discussion? Do a roll call vote. Noel?
Aye.
Tim?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
Jen?
Thank you.
Aye.
And I'm an aye as well. Passes 5-0.
Move to approve the meeting minutes from the February 24th, 2025 executive session as written.
Second?
We have a motion, we have a second. Any discussion? Roll call vote. Noel?
Aye.
Tim?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
Jen?
Aye.
I'm an aye as well. Passes 5-0.
And-
Next one, could we get it corrected to say 2025?
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
look at that guy.
Is it wrong on the actual minutes, or is it just wrong on the agenda?
Let's see.
It's good on the minute.
It's good on the minutes, okay. So we don't need to correct.
Move to approve the meeting minutes for February 24th, 2025 open session.
Second?
We have a motion, we have a second. Any discussion? The roll call vote. Noel?
Aye.
Tim? Jeff?
Aye.
Jen?
Aye.
I'm an aye as well. Passes 5-0. Thank you very much. Mr. Connolly, budget update?
So nothing this evening.
Oh, yeah, none of
On
this
the
time.
March 24th, but
Okay.
things is trending the same as it was last meeting.
Staffing, Dr. Daly?
A few updates, we have Lisa Bella, the long-term substitute adjustment counselor at the Batchelder School, Ina Constantino, building substitute at the Hood, Andrea Cote, long-term substitute teacher for special ed at the Hood, and Thomas Lane, a van driver for the district. Also had a number of retirements, resignations. Christine Morgan, teacher of general music and chorus at the Batchelder School. Miss Deborah Reynolds, teacher of kindergarten at the Batchelder. Miss Kathy Govain at the Hood School. Miss Joyce Lorton at the Hood School. Miss Nancy Sexton, paraprofessional at the Hood School. The Little School, Miss Heidi Castle, Miss Leslie Nazone, Miss Christine Davis at the middle school. At the high school, Miss Catherine Francis, science teacher. Mr. Johnson, our teacher and physical education athletic director. Dr. Downs, director of digital learning. And Sue Rin, our food service lead. So I wish all those folks the very best in retirement or in their new positions. And we will be inviting those retirees to our ceremonies at the end of the year.
Yeah, some very big names there,
Yeah,
so
for
we'll
sure.
miss some of those people. And just as a reminder, if we can we, at some point, and I'd love to see it in the next couple of meetings, get an idea of the long-term subsidy?
We actually have that.
Oh, you
For
have
the
that?
next budget.
Oh, next meeting,
Okay,
okay,
yeah, we have
perfect,
that.
perfect, great. And then bids and donations? Mr. Friedman, you want to lead us?
Aren't they?
What? No?
There aren't.
Oh, there are none, there were none there. I thought there were, no?
It says, please see here.
There were,
Am I on the wrong?
I think so. Somebody else want to lead us?
I would if I had an internet connection, I could open them, but
Okay, they're right up
Mine's
there.
not-
Jeff, just look up.
there you go.
I'm not sure why mine doesn't have it. Maybe I'm
Thought
on
there
the
was
wrong
some.
thing. I move that the school committee vote to accept with gratitude a donation in the amount of $825 from On Bui to be put toward the high school robotics 2 class. 500, I'm not sure why there's a parenthetical.
It's breaking it down.
And,
525 and 300.
525, and the North Reading High School track and field program, 300. Okay.
Second?
Okay, we have a motion, we have a second. We'll do a roll call vote. Jeff?
Aye.
Noel?
Aye.
Tim?
Aye.
Jen?
Aye.
I'm an aye as well. Passes 5-0.
I move that the school committee vote to accept with gratitude a donation in the amount of $1,000 from Takeda Pharmaceuticals USA to be put toward the robotics 2 class at the high school.
Second?
We have a motion, we have a second. I'll do a roll call vote. Jeff?
Aye.
Noel?
Aye.
Tim?
Aye.
Jen?
Aye.
I'm an aye as well. Passes 5-0.
I move that the school committee vote to accept with gratitude a donation in the amount of $300 from Frango's Chicken, 2000 LLC, to be put toward the swim team gift amount at the high school.
Second?
We have a motion, we have a second. Roll call vote. Jeff?
Aye.
Noel?
Aye.
Tim?
Aye.
Jen?
Aye.
I'm an aye as well. Passes 5-0. That was it. No grants at this time.
All right.
No overnight trips. School committee social media.
You ready for the big show?
Sutherland, yes.
All right, so we have new folks in the group today. So earlier this year, the policy committee worked with the school committee to create new social media policy to help get information out to the community in more contextual, bite-sized chunks. So tonight, we've just got some examples to show to the school committee of relevant events that we have seen between tonight, actually, and previous school committee meetings that meet policy, and the examples of the type of information that we expect to display moving forward, so we get some feedback. So here's one right here. We got the cheer team. Here's a did you know with the information with class size, actually, Scott, that you brought up earlier.
Great.
Upcoming events. Other simpler, interesting fact, right, just to catch people's eye, right? So the less than, well, another one Scott brought up. Boy, Scott, we're on the same wavelength on right, meeting invitations for school committee meetings to try to pick up our attendance here in the DLL. Any others in there? Girls indoor track. I think we talked about them at our last meeting. Three-time repeat.
Those are
And
great.
that's all 7 of them. So
Going in
really-
with a splash.
What was that?
Going in with a splash.
You're going in with the splash.
So like going back to like some of the budget that you highlighted, for example, will there be like a hyperlink where you could link to a larger budget presentation?
Yes, so the
things
way
like
that we design this, right, in the policy is really, the intention is, right, so things that we go through in open meeting would then be eligible to be put into social media. We'd present it as part of routine minutes. I'm thinking what we would do is we talk about the facts that we want to do here. These are templates in the tool that we've created that will allow us to rapidly generate these facts, which is kind of why I went down the road of making the different styles. It's got a graphic or it doesn't have a graphic or whatever. And we can certainly make more, so if anybody has any ideas on a graphic layout that would make sense for a specific type of information, we can do that. And then in the way that works per the policy that we voted on and agreed earlier, right? So the image would be displayed in Meta and or X and or any other social media that we create in the future. It will be locked for comment, so there will not be comments, but there will be a single comment from the school committee that references the meeting in which it was presented and a link to that meeting. So that way they can go back and independently verify, right? So the point of this is to put information on social media that can then be immediately backed to a public meeting and fact checked. So that way we're not.
Can it also
we're
go to the website where this is?
Correct. If it's pointing to agenda for a future school committee meeting, it would point you to the town webpage where you can get access to the meeting. The point is to always refer back to the meeting
Right.
so people understand and they can appreciate that these are actual facts from public meeting. These are not made up items from the school committee
They're not
in their spare
they're not
time.
opinion. We're not having one school committee purport to represent the school committee and make
Correct.
their own personal comments.
Correct.
Quick question, I just don't recall, are these, I know locked for commenting, are they shareable?
They are shareable. Yep, there's nothing preventing sharing. In fact, yep, it's encouraged per MASC as well. So really, that way we don't worry and run into any open meeting law violations, right? Because we've locked comments in. The expectation is that this is informational for the community. The community can share it to whatever group, public, private page, public page, whatever they would like, and then it'll refer back to our page for the information.
We should make sure that if it's a comment, we actually made it in there. Like, I made those 2 comments, but that wasn't necessarily part of the presentation.
You mean as far as
Like if this was gonna be the thing we shared out, I know it's a template example, but we should make sure that it's shared in the meeting if we wanna share that specific page out. That
Yes.
wasn't part of the original presentation. That my only point is that chart, or actually, was that chart on the?
what's in the budget book, right? Which was
It was in the
presented at
budget
this
book,
meeting.
but the whole budget book wasn't shared. I would just think we have to coordinate between, if Michael's presentation didn't have that, we should probably make sure that's in there, rather than just in the whole budget book.
I get where you're going. I'm not sure. I mean, this
It's
was
being
attached to
I
the
don't
whole
know.
thing and
Budget
is
book.
made public.
The budget book's public, I guess.
Yeah.
That's-
Yeah.
Yeah.
I get where you're going
Yeah.
though, that we should match up.
Well, again, you're
this
trying to
piece.
refer back to the meeting, but if that wasn't shared in the meeting.
When we
we're gonna-
publish-
True, well, it is, yeah, you can go.
Just a question through you to Michael.
Yeah.
When you publish the presentation, will it have your backup slides too? Do you typically do that?
No, I don't do that.
Okay.
No.
I mean, we could.
Yeah, you could.
Right.
Because he has
Yeah.
all those as backup.
But
slides.
this
Correct.
is
This is in
published.
the
Yeah.
this is
I know.
published.
But I'm just saying, like, if we're gonna emphasize things from the meeting, they should be probably presented in the meeting. There was a lot of other
Yeah.
materials there, but, yeah, just, we could put this out there.
I mean, my opinion is, at tonight's meeting, this preliminary budget was released for the entire community. So I view it as all 100 and X pages in here are public domain at this
Yeah.
point,
Yeah.
right?
I don't disagree.
And we're
but,
referencing
And
that.
we're referencing it, right.
Yeah, it
I don't
came
think
up
we need to
because we asked
specifically go through
comments.
it. And that way, and honestly, part of this is to engage the community. So hopefully, this drives questions regarding the budget and then prompts more people to come in and then further engage the community to, people understand the budget process. They understand the challenges that we have to really start engaging the community.
By the way,
gonna
I think
post
this is
these now?
great. This isn't a comment on whether we like the style.
Right, no, this is
Yeah.
great.
And the material's fantastic, but
Yeah, and I love you templated it. Who's the tech person that template? Like, are you the
I'm gonna
Canva
Wow.
designer? Are you
minor,
moonlighting?
minor graphic design experience
Oh my
of
gosh,
6 hours yesterday, and that was about it. So,
okay.
did you like how she just assumed you were not capable
Yeah,
of doing
exactly.
No, I mean, because you're like the jack of all trades. You're
but with that said, if anybody would like to take a crack at creating a template that has better graphic design
It's
skills than
lovely.
I,
I'm ready to hire you.
Okay, are we ready to start publishing these things then?
So next steps are we have to get this application connected to social media accounts, which Dr. Daly and I are working. And then from there, I think at next school committee meeting, I would look to have a discussion about specific items to post.
Right.
Was that a reasonable timeline?
Good. Okay,
I don't know if that was did she want to speak or?
thank you.
That's just her comment.
Jen, was that approval or just a cough?
That was a cough, but I would just actually like to say one thing. I'm so excited that this is finally getting going, and this will just be, obviously we have to grow the social media page, and Tim and I have a school committee goal of communicating more with the public, and I think the biggest issue is around the budget. So this is the first step, and hopefully we will be attending more community meetings and talking to more people, and maybe even holding some coffees or something like that to anyone who wants to come and learn and hear more. So this is a amazing first step.
Very good.
All right. Thank you guys very much.
Yeah,
A lot of good work going on with that, so thank you, both of you. Okay, subcommittee update, CIPC update. Mr. Sutherland?
I learned more about the library HVAC system than I ever could have imagined. That was pretty much the entire meeting, I believe, Don. Am I correct?
Think you learned it.
I think I learned. And then the follow-up meeting next week, we'll start ranking the capital projects next Thursday.
Okay, thank you very much. Policy subcommittee? Anything other than what we saw today? Or?
Second readings, and then we're going to continue working. Sorry, Jen, I know that you're sick, so we're going to continue reviewing policies B and then followed by C and D. We're going to run right down the list. I don't think we have any more targeted policies.
Health wellness
Health and
policy,
wellness.
at our next meeting, we're hoping to get more information and be able to bring that forward for first reading soon.
Okay. Finance planning team?
a lot of our discussion, as was alluded to, dealt with healthcare, the rising cost of healthcare, how do we offset it? How do we deal with that in future years? Obviously, I don't want to get too into that because that's part of the larger budget discussions that aren't really directly for us, but there is obviously the carry-on effect that we were just talking about, that those things will have an effect on the schools as well as teacher and staff, teacher, educator negotiations. So I would say that was like 75 or 80% of our discussion.
Yeah. And we did talk about the joint meeting, which we'll see in the future business coming up, so mark your calendars. I saw a calendar entry come out, which is good. Finance subcommittee schedule, CIPC is scheduled to meet March 13th at 8:15 a.m., Policy Subcommittee March 18th at 3 p.m., Finance Planning Team March 24th at 8 a.m., Athletic Subcommittee March 12th at 12:30, Fine Arts Subcommittee April 17th at 3:15. Dr. Daly, Administrative Report.
Thank you. I just had a few items here. Little school principal search update. We had 31 applications. I think I said 29. We had a few come in right at the last minute. We are interviewing 8 candidates this week. So thank you to our interview team, Ms. Sacco and Ms. Soares, for pulling this all together. Mr. Colleen and I have been meeting with actually former DESE Commissioner Jeff Riley, who's working with MIT in a program called MIT Raise, which offers free open source AI tools, curriculum assessments, and teacher professional development materials. We're going to be partnering with them for some professional development and access to materials for classroom use that will be for the 25-26 school year. So we're really excited about that. Student Opportunity Act, as I mentioned earlier, there is a date for submission. So last year we submitted our new plan. I am bringing this to the public this week. I will have a brief survey to engage families in sharing their ideas and thoughts about how we're working towards our goal. It's a little bit of a struggle, as I mentioned before, but our goal is to reduce the kindergarten tuition. I do have to submit that by April 1st. It does not need school committee approval as the plan itself does, but it is strongly suggested that I keep you updated, and I will continue to do so. And the last piece, I had mentioned this before, I just wanted to share that there is a press release out, I believe today, but the police are working to go live with their body-worn cameras at the end, mid-March. This is some of the language that we have introduced to modify our SRO contract, our MOU with the SRO. Essentially just describes in detail the circumstances when the cameras would be on in the school. So routine matters at the school, and this was included in the press release, will not include body-worn cameras. But if there is any kind of a violent interaction, if there's an intruder, if there's any criminal investigation, if there's a call for help, the cameras would be turned on. Otherwise, there would not be cameras inside the schools. So there'd be no difference there, as we're very cognizant of student privacy. But we do see the benefit of having the cameras for any of the dimensions here.
But to be clear, this is over and above the cameras we already have. I mean, there are cameras.
This is a body-worn camera.
Right.
Yeah.
I just didn't want people to think that, like, there's no surveillance or anything that's going on in the schools.
Correct. Those are video.
Right, correct.
Yep.
And again, this is not the school committee approving this. This is the North Reading Police Department having this.
Yeah, we're informed of it. We're not.
Right,
yeah.
correct.
Right,
We're
I'm
not
keeping
giving
you-
approval to this, yeah.
I'm keeping you informed, and I just want to make sure, especially with
Right.
privacy concerns, I want to make sure everyone knew here that we have had extensive conversations partnering with the police department on this work.
On the little school principal search, so if I recall, all of them are external candidates, correct?
Correct.
And can you just, I have no idea, like, is 31 a good number for a principal? Or,
I think that's,
Is that
I think
fair?
that's a pretty good number.
no, that seemed high to me. I'm just surprised that, like, there was that many. Was that,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's a good range of experience, so we're going to see some veteran principals, some mid-career principals, and some aspiring principals or assistant principals looking to be a principal, that type of a position. So we're excited to see our interviews the next few days.
Nice.
Good luck. No correspondence?
Not at this time.
Future business, we have a meeting March 24th. That is the middle school and high school presentations, Student Opportunities Act, and we will have Representative Jones and Senator Tarr in attendance as well. So, March 26th, that is the joint meeting, Select Board, School Committee, and Finance Committee. That will be here at 7 PM. And the idea is to talk about the budget deficit as a continuous group. We have a budget workshop probably before the April 7th meeting, and then April 7th, we have our public hearing. And we might need another budget workshop after that. And then April 28th, we have a meeting for the Turner, that's gonna be at the Hood School. And we will have the vote on the budget on that date, on April 28th,
I
so.
think the budget, I mean, the other presentation had the budget workshop earlier on the 7th.
I don't know what it was.
So that's,
Before the meeting, so yes,
Yeah.
whatever it was.
yeah, if I could just
Yes.
ask, do we want to set a date for that, or
Yeah.
a process for setting that date? Michael might have had a date in his
No, no, I'm
timeline
fine.
based on
Actually,
what
that's
we've done in the past. We've done them early in the morning, in the afternoon. There's, I don't know if there's any clarity on when we want to do that, or do we want to wait until after the 24th meeting to see when we want to set that workshop?
As I've said before, so it's not a mystery, I will be gone the week of the 24th. I can participate in the 26th remotely, but I will not be here on the 24th and can't be a part of it. So if we want to decide I will pretty much do what everybody, majority rules, and I will go along. If we do it on the 7th, I'm more than happy to participate that day.
Yeah, I'd be okay with the 7th. Do you want to do it earlier on the 7th?
Like right before our meeting?
Yeah, like a couple hours
I
before,
prefer
probably.
a few hours before the meeting as opposed to the morning.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's fine.
Does that work for everybody or not?
I just want to make sure, so we're confirmed for the 6th, because I have to post that in the newspaper and everything. So the 7th for the public hearing, we're sticking with,
That's fine.
and we'll do a budget workshop. We want to say 5 o'clock on that day?
Yeah,
Yeah, that's great.
Okay.
that works.
I already put it in my calendar.
Okay. If there's nothing else, entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn?
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second. Noel?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
Tim?
Aye.
Jen?
Aye.
I'm an aye as well. Feel better, Jen. Thank
job
you,
getting
everybody.
here, Jen.
Thank
We are
you.
adjourned.